Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we focus on using the Google Maps APIs through our Python Django application. This tutorial series consists of 4 videos. In the previous video we already configured the Google Cloud Platform and we made changes to the settings of our Django application. And these changes make sure that we can actually make requests to the Google Maps APIs through our Python Django application. Over the course of the next few videos, we will also engage in distance calculations and focus on trying to place markers on the map. In this video, the focus is on geocoding. As you can see in my application right now, we have several records which actually represent football stadiums, and we are going to geocode the address information into coordinates. By the end of the tutorial, we will have achieved that we can simply press the button for one of these records, and it will bring us to a page where we can see the information geocoded to a latitude, to a longitude, and also with a place ID. And this can be very helpful because if you want to place markers on the map, it is very convenient to have the latitude, the longitude, but also the place ID of certain records. So what do we need to do in order to achieve this? Well, I'm going to start by giving you an overview of my Django application before adding all of the geocoding code. This will give you a little bit of an idea of the application that I started working on. Next, we're going to create a basic URL, a view, and a template for geocoding so that we can go to a different page where that information is displayed. Next, we can use the Google Maps functions inside of our view to actually geocode an address. We're going to interpret the results that Google provides to us because that's not as straightforward as it might seem. We're then going to extract the latitude and the longitude and also the place ID from that long string that Google provides. And as the last step, we will be adding that to our database just so we have those records stored instead of just displayed on the screen. Let's start this video with a basic overview of my Django application. Everything that you will see on the screen is coming from a folder called project content. And in there, I've created one URL with one view and one template. So I have a URL pointing to the home page, and that is attached to a class-based view, which displays a list. And that list comes from our model named locations. And that is also the only model that we have. So if we go into our models.py file, you can see that we have one model that gathers location data. In this case, it's about football clubs. So it saves a club, a name of the stadium, for example, and then the different location points that we will need. And also a created at and edited at date. In terms of templates, we've got a base.html template which sets some basic things, and that is then passed on to my home.html template. And this is nothing more than a bar that states the title of the page, and then a table which displays the information from my locations. And when we start our server, you will see that this is what the output looks like. We have a basic table with a number of entries that I have added through my Django admin portal under my locations model. We're now going to use this information from address, zip code, city, and country to start geocoding. So as you saw in the geocoding example at the start of this video, I want to go to a new page that displays the geocoded results for a particular row here. So the first thing that we need to do is create a new URL that uses the ID of these records here to go to a new page. And then we would also need a template and a view to display some basic information. So let's get started with that. So I'm going to start off by going to my code and go to the urls.py file because we need a new path that takes into account the ID to go to a certain page. I'm just going to copy this first path that I have here, and I'm going to call this geocoding because that's where we go. And I'm going to take the ID from each record to know where we're going. And you do that by specifying integer and then pk there. Well, now it is attached to my home view, but we're going to create a new view called geocoding view as view. And in the name, we're going to call it not my home view, but we will call it my geocoding view. So let's go to my views.py file and also create the geocoding view. So I'm just going to copy this right here, and I'm going to change this to geocoding view. And we're not going to be using the list view, but we're actually going to just use a simple view. So on the top of my screen, I'm going to say from Django.views import view. All right, and then we're going to use view here in my geocoding view. Yeah, we need to fill in a few things for this to work. So starting off, we need a template name. So I'm going to say that the template is going to be geocoding.html, but we will need to create this in a minute. And I'm also going to define a get method, because when we get on the page, I want to get some information and display that on the screen. So I'm going to say get self request. And we're going to use the primary key that is sent in the URL to find our relevant locations. So in our get statement, and let's move this away, I want to get my location because I want to know which location we are geocoding for. So I'm going to say location is going to be equal to locations.objects.get, and the primary key needs to be equal to the primary key that has been sent to the URL. Well, of course, we also need to pass this location to my template, and we can do that by using context. So I'm going to define context is equal to, and I'm going to open the parenthesis, and I'm going to say location is equal to location. And now I can use location inside of my template, and it will display the data that it gets from my get statement. And the last thing that we need to do is return render. So we are going to say return render request, and then we're going to return the self.template name, and we are going to take the context. And also don't forget that at the top you need to import render from Django.shortcuts. You don't need to do any installs for that, it should be fine. The only thing that we're now missing is our geocoding.html file, because we don't have that at the moment. So I'm just going to copy and paste my home.html file, and I'm going to rename that as my geocoding.html. And in here, I can use, I can do whatever I want. So I'm going to say geocoding template 4, and then I'm going to use my location.name. And this is the data object that we're looking for, and we're referring to the name variable inside of my model. And similar here, I can display all of the information that we have. And I'm just not going to do an if statement to see whether there's data, because we will know that there is data. And I also don't need to do a for loop, because I'm not going to loop through records, because I know that I'm only having one record. So I'm just going to delete that. And here I can display my location.id, and let's continue that. So I can display my location.name, location.address, zip code, city, and country. Now the only thing that we need to make sure is that we can get to this page from our homepage. So I'm going to add another column here to my table, and I'm going to call it geocode link. And then I also need to define the value of that column. And this is going to be a link to the page that we've just created. And the text that I'm going to display is going to be always the same, and just do geocode. And now we need to display the link, which is href. And then we need to do parentheses. We need to have 2 curly brackets and a %sign on both of the sides. And then here we can say URL and then the name of the URL. And in my case, I called it my geocoding view, we also need to specify the ID, and I know that the ID is simply a.id. So after this my geocoding view, I'm also going to specify that we pass in a.id. So let's see whether everything that we've just done is doing its thing. So I'm going to refresh this page, and you will see here that we have all of our data, but also the geocode link. And on the bottom left of the screen, you can already see that the URL points me to geocoding and then /1, because that is also the ID of this particular stadium, the Radverleg Stadium. So if I now click on geocode, it brings me to this geocoding 1, and it says geocoding template for the Radverleg Stadium, and it provides all of the information for this particular stadium. And now we can start geocoding this particular one. So now let's change this get statement so we can actually also get some geocoded information inside of our view. And the first things that we're going to do on top is we're going to import some of the modules. The first one is we're going to import Google Maps, and we have made this install in the first video of this tutorial series, so be sure to go back and check out what you need to do to configure this. And we also need to import our settings. So from Django.conf, we're going to import our settings. And the reason that we need this is we need our API key from Google to make the requests. Going down into our geocoding view, we need to do a few things. So first of all, I am going to make sure that we test whether we even have this address information available inside of our location, because I don't want to make requests when information is missing. So I'm just going to say for my one, because you can see here in the table on the top, I have an address, I have a zip code, a city, and a country, and I want all of those things to be present, otherwise I don't want to do the request. So I'm just going to say if location.address and location dot country and location dot zip code and location dot city does not equal none, then I'm going to geocode. So the first thing that we're going to do for geocoding is making sure that our address information is concatenated to each other, because we need to supply it into one string. So I'm going to do create a string from the location.address, and then I'm going to string this together with a comma in between. And now I'm going to add my location.zip code. Well, same thing here. I need to concatenate it with a comma in between, another plus. I'm going to do that with the location.city, and you can already guess it's doing the same thing with a comma in between, and you can also do the same thing for location.country, because it's the last one we need to address there. We've got one plus there. And this should give us a string that combines all of these location items together. I think that Google can get a result if you provide less information. I don't think it matters too much. For example, if you leave out the country or the city, it should kind of recognize that. But just to be sure, I'm using as much information as possible to get a good result. Okay, now let's use the API then. How do we do that? I start off by specifying Gmaps. It can of course be whatever you want. And we are going to say Google Maps.client with a capital. And here we're going to authenticate ourselves. And we need to specify our API key so Google knows we can make this request. And we have added that API key in our settings file, which you remember from our first video. So we can do settings.google API key like this. And this will send the API key to Google, and they can authenticate whether you are who you say that you are. And on the settings.py file, you can see right here that we included it as an environment variable in the first tutorial. Okay, so now that we have authenticated ourselves, we can use this gmaps function to make requests. So I'm going to just call it result for now, and it's going to state JSON. Oh no, actually, let's not do that. I'm just going to do gmaps dot geocode, because that is a function we actually use, and we're going to pass in our address string, and this should provide us with an initial result based on our API request. And I'm also going to say if the information is not available, I'm just going to say result is going to be equal to nothing. And now I want to get this result into my application, so I'm just going to say result is equal to result, which passes it to my template with a comma there. And let's save it, and let's see what the initial output is if I do this inside of my view. So I'm going to go to my HTML page, and I'm just going to copy one of my items, link holder here. So we have another box where the results are displayed. And I'm just going to specify result. Is it result or results? Result. So this should give us the result of our query. So going back to our code, I'm going to press enter. You will see that we get a result, but it is a very long string of all different kind of things here. So the things that I do like is that I see the street returned here. I get a whole bunch of information. It's quite hard to read actually. I do see the latitude and the longitude included in this string, also the place ID, and those are the things that we are after. So yeah, this is the initial result we get. And you can also see that in Google's documentation that the results of your geocoding request will be returned in this JSON string. So let's see if we can now extract the information that we want. And the information that I want in this tutorial series is the latitude and the longitude, which is inside location, which is inside geometry. And I'm also interested in the place ID. So those are the things that I'm after. So essentially what we need to do is we need to go down one level so we get into the results, and then we need to specify the string that we are looking for. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to our results, and we're going to just add square brackets and add a 0. And let's see what that does. So the previous time we've been here, you can see that the entire result is surrounded by these square brackets, but we want to get inside of these square brackets. And to do that, we need to specify the 0 because it identifies that we're looking for the first items inside of those square brackets. So if I now refresh this with the 0 attached, you will see that the square brackets go away, and this enables us to drill down deeper into this hierarchy. So that's the first step we need to take there. So now I'm specifically going to look for the information inside of geometry, because we've just saw that this is where our latitude and longitude is. So I can define geometry, and I can say that we want to take a look at our result because that's where we're coming from, and we want to get something, and the thing that we want to get is the name geometry because that's what we're looking for. And I also need to define these two brackets in the end. So I need to now pass this geometry variable to my template. Oh, it needs to be like this. And let's go to our template, and I'm just going to copy the result one just to show you the difference. And then go geometry. And now when we go back to our app, we should see another response below. Yeah, and you can now see that we only get the information that is inside of geometry. So we can go even further, and we can now make sure that we can also get only the things inside of location, which is the latitude and the longitude. So going back to our code again, go to our views, and we are going to copy this one and say location. I already have something called location, so I'm just going to call it location 1. And now we're not going to do result.get, but we're going to do geometry.get because we're going further down the result chain, and we're going to look for the name location. And now we can pass in the location 1 here, do the same thing again inside of our template. And now let's see what it looks like in our app. So refreshing it. And there you can see we get even further down, and we now have the latitude and the longitude specified. So you can already guess what we're going to do now. We're going to get the latitude and the longitude just to illustrate how you can get to those final levels. And let's just copy those, say let and longitude, and we are going to get that from location 1. So we do location 1.get, and we specify the latitude and the longitude. But now we don't enter these brackets because we're running out of brackets. This is the final result chain. There is nothing after this. So we're going to specify none. Just going to pass these ones into my code here, and we are also going to add these to our geocoding view. Well, let's just do it like this. So we have let and we have lng. And going back to our code, refreshing it once again, you will see that we now get the final values. We also want to get the place ID, and you can see that place ID is on the same level as geometry in this hierarchy. So we could go to our code, go to views, and take this one for geometry, but we can just call it place ID and place ID. Just add this again to our code here, go to our view and copy and paste it, and now say place ID. So everything is saved, and then when refreshing this, you will see that we get the place identifier from this huge string. Now in this video, we're only looking for the latitude, the longitude, and the place ID. So going from step to step to latitude is quite inefficient. We can also make this code a little bit shorter by just concatenating some of the things together. So what I can do here, if I just want to get the latitude, the longitude, and the place ID, well, the place ID can stay as is. But I can skip the steps of geometry and location by simply including them in front of our latitude. So I can go and put the result.get first for latitude. Then I can string that to .get location. And then we can string that again by doing .get latitude. And we can do the same for longitude. I'm just going to copy and paste it, but change this one to lng. And then we don't need this in between steps of geometry and location 1, because it will be specified automatically. And we can now just remove geometry and location 1. Save that. Let's also remove it from here, geometry and location 1. And let's see what result we are getting. There you go. Now we just get the same thing, but just just like that. And just in general, for presentation sake, I'm going to make it a little bit better. I'm just going to add 3 headers here and say let longitude and place ID. And then I can add 3 fields here and specify them as let G for longitude and place ID. So now they will display in the table, and I can remove all of this stuff here. Let's save that, take a look at the code again, and there we go. Now it is all looking a little bit better inside of our table. Now you can also save this stuff inside of your database, and I'm going to do just that. But then we will need a few fields here, and this causes me to not do it over and over again. So I can say here, let LNG and place ID, and I'm just going to save them as character fields. Then I'm going to stop my server and say Python manage.py make migrations. All right, Python manage.py migrate. There we go. Python manage.py server. Okay, and then I can go in here and just save these results to my database, and that can be done by saying that location.let is equal to let location dot d is equal to g, and location dot place id is equal to place id, and then we just do location dot save. And now when we save this and reload it, it should save those latitude, longitude, and place IDs to my database. So let's see whether it does that. Okay, it seems to have run the code. We see the results here. Now let's check into my database. I'm just going to refresh it, and you can see here that it has stored latitude, longitude, and place ID inside of the database. Now we can make it even more smart, and we can start with an if statement that states if location.lng and location.let and location.place ID does not equal none, then I don't even want to do this because it's already in there. But then we can define let, for example, as location.let, and we can do the same for location.lng and the same for the place ID. And then it doesn't even need to use the API because it is already there. And this becomes an else or elif. Don't need to take result into our code because it's just location, latitude, longitude, and the place ID. Well, we can also make it a little bit more foolproof and say let is otherwise going to be empty, LNG is otherwise going to be empty, and the place ID is also going to be empty if the address information is not going to be there. And now it should hopefully always work. So let's go back to our code and see what it does. And actually I'm going to add a label that states from my database. I'm going to create a label here that states from my API call, and we also need to define the label here, no call made. And then we can add the label here as the last thing, just to see where it comes from and do some checks. And then we're going to go to our geocoding and go to the top. Just do add some brackets here which state the label so we can see where it comes from. All right. Now if we go to our geocoding.1, you can see, okay, this Rotverleg Stadium comes from my database, which is correct because we have stored these things inside of the database. Now if we go back to our home page and take another one, so let's say Parken, let's geocode that, and it says that this one comes from my API call. And now if I do it again, it should come from my database because by doing it from the API call, it has stored it in my database. And there you can see that now this information comes from my database. Okay, I think this is all for this video. We've made quite a few steps and we're now able to geocode address information into coordinates and also including the place ID. In the next videos, we're also going to focus on placing markers on the map and calculating distances between two locations. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Yeah, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you the next time. Bye bye.